Back in April, I had planned a vacation with two of my friends to go see what I thought was going to be a once-in-a-lifetime experience, and that was one of the last 4 space shuttle launches in Florida. We watched that launch from the NASA Causeway, which is about as close as you can expect to get if you're just a member of the public, but we had to pay about $110 for that privilege, from 11 o'clock the night before until about 6:30 in the morning, with a gap of maybe an hour and a half where we were toured the visitor center in the middle of the night. We were stuck on a bus. I'm not complaining. We saw a fantastic launch. I got some awesome pictures, and it's a memory that will live with me forever. And with 3 shuttle launches to go, I never thought I'd get to see another one. But one of my friends let me know that the NASA Twitter feed was advertising a contest of sorts, more of a lottery actually, where they were going to invite people to their Tweetup for the next shuttle launch mission. Turns out over 1,000 people signed up and they chose 150, one of which was me. They were organizing 2 days worth of events before the shuttle launch, and they were going to let us see the shuttle launch from the press site, which is about 3 miles closer than the causeway I'd seen it on before. That clinched it. I had to go. So the first day I'm there, I drive to the Kennedy Space Center, and using the directions they gave me, I find the place where we registered. We were all standing in line, very excited to give them our IDs, and in exchange, they gave us a NASA bag full of all sorts of promotional goodies. One of the coolest things in there was some freeze-dried space ice cream, which I haven't tried yet. So I'm going to go ahead and give it a shot here. Looks like an ice cream bar, sort of warm and dehydrated. But actually really good. At the security checkpoints, we had to flash our incredibly cool NASA Tweetup press badges. Then we drove to the vehicle assembly building and hung a right, and right there was the press area. They had a tent set up for us right next to the countdown clock, and it had air conditioning inside. It was grass on the ground with tables set up everywhere, with power connections and Wi-Fi so that we could get on the internet and use our Twitter accounts. It was actually a very comfortable setup. They had a podium up front flanked by 2 screens showing whatever NASA TV was showing, and they paraded in a whole bunch of guest speakers for us the first morning. When the speakers were talking, I tried to give them my full attention. I took a few pictures, of course, and some video, but I noticed a lot of people were just buried in their laptop, tweeting and retweeting everything that was said. I'm sure NASA loved that because the whole point of inviting so many people is that we rebroadcast that to our own audiences and build up the enthusiasm that we feel for NASA. I posted maybe 20 tweets that day, and I was worried that I was boring the people that follow me. Some people must have posted literally hundreds. Looking around at the tweeps, as we called ourselves, I noticed a very diverse bunch of people. There were quite a few that knew a lot more than I did about NASA. There were some like me that were just kind of there, starstruck, and just taking it all in. That afternoon, after lunch, we got to go on a tour of some of the NASA facilities. First stop was the International Space Station Center. There was an introductory movie that was maybe 5 minutes long, and then we were let into a place where they had mock-ups of the different living modules and the science modules. I almost missed it because we didn't have a lot of time there, but if you cross this elevated bridge, you could look down into the real clean room. There wasn't a lot of activity going on, but it was kind of cool looking into the place where they actually build the modules for the space station. Next stop was the Saturn V Center, which was really, I thought, quite impressive. First, we were shown a movie that talked about the space race, kind of emotional when they touched on some of the losses and hurdles that were overcome to achieve the first moon landing.
I was a launch controller here when from this very spot, man took off to fly to the moon.
After that, we were ushered into the actual mission control room that has been restored and sort of turned into a museum. They had a presentation there that kind of made it feel like it did when they launched the Saturn V rocket, and they dimmed the lights. You can see the different control stations light up and the sequence of events on the wall.
First stage, the oxygen tank has been pressurized and the pressure is still building up.
After that, we had about an hour or so that we could wander about the Saturn V museum. They had the newly restored Saturn V rocket with all sorts of displays and dioramas around. I touched a rock that actually came from the moon. I went in to get a drink and found out that they were incredibly expensive and made a joke on Twitter that that must be how they're funding the space program. After the Saturn V Center, we had what was probably the most amazing experience for me for the day. We went out to the launch pad. We were within maybe 200 or 300 yards of the Space Shuttle Atlantis the day before it was set to launch. There were camera boxes all around us that people had set up, and we were there to watch what they call the rotating service structure retract. It's that huge apparatus that's leaning up against the space shuttle, and they pull it away, leaving the shuttle exposed on the launch pad by itself. It happens very slowly, so you don't really end up staring at it the whole time. But bit by bit and piece by piece, you see Atlantis revealed on the launch pad. It was very, very cool to be there for that. Before we left, we had our group Tweetup photo taken by the NASA photographer. I left that night probably around 6:30, and while I was in Orlando, I called a local radio station here in Juneau and gave a short little interview about my experiences down there, which is kind of neat. The next day I had a lot of people sending me tweets saying that they woke up to me on the radio. The second day didn't start out so great. I guess there were something like 300,000 people driving to the coast, and I didn't plan ahead for traffic, so I got there a little bit late and was literally running in to get into the second Tweetup group photo. After that, we again set up in the Tweetup tent, and I can't speak for everybody else, but my sense of anticipation for the launch made it so that I couldn't quite pay attention like I did the day before. I found myself getting up and going outside and looking at the countdown clock. I went and found a spot where I could set up my tripod and sort of claim my space up front. There was a moment where CNN came in and interviewed some people in the Tweetup. I myself was right behind Stephanie when she was giving a local TV station an interview.
Today they are primarily here to watch the launch, but we have some guest speakers for them. We just got done with astronauts.
And then they turned and talked to me. As far as I know, that never aired. I didn't see anything on their website, but about 45 minutes before the launch, I went out and started setting up my tripod and my camera gear. I had decided this time that I was going to go for video, since I had focused on getting photos on the last launch. But with 3 or 4 cameras with me, I couldn't really decide what to use, so I had a kind of creative solution. I brought a tripod plate, and with bungee cords and gaffer's tape, I put all 3 of my cameras on it and focused them all on the launch pad so that when I moved it, they would move together and hopefully keep pointing at the same thing. Our only rule in setting up our tripods was that if any of the official media asked us to move, we had to. Fortunately, where I picked apparently wasn't in the way, because the only media that came over to me just wanted to take pictures of my crazy camera setup. In the 45 minutes before the shuttle launch, we watched manatees frolicking in the water out in front of us. An alligator swam right underneath, right by my feet. The launch itself was spectacular. Being half again as close as I was on my first launch, I could definitely tell a difference in the sound. It was louder. I actually felt the rumble in my chest. It shook me. Focusing ring or something on the camera that was set to take some photos, because every single one of them turned out blurry. Do I regret that? Not a bit. The only disappointment was, from our vantage point, the column of smoke went straight up, and as the shuttle arced over the eastern horizon, it fell behind that column of smoke, and we weren't even given a chance to see the booster separation. After the launch, I was coming down off an emotional high and I had a long drive ahead of me, but it was interesting to think that there were hundreds or thousands of NASA employees all over the country that their work was just beginning. The space shuttle had to get into orbit and then dock with the space station, carry out their mission, and then return. I just kind of chilled out in the Tweetup tent and spent some time out on the grass by the countdown clock reflecting on an amazing experience. It's funny to think that all of this came about because of Twitter, a service that so many people don't want to join because they think it's just people talking about what they had for lunch. But without Twitter, I never would have seen a shuttle launch from the NASA press site. And a big thanks to Stephanie at NASA who put this whole thing together. I mean, she gave me a second once-in-a-lifetime experience. And who knows, with 2 more shuttle launches, maybe there's a third once-in-a-lifetime experience waiting for me.